Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Riley Hall Show, the show with hot questions and even hotter wings. Today, we're going to be talking about some very important events that have been happening in both British and French politics and some other stuff from around the world, of course, as we always do. First thing that we have to talk about is, well, it's kind of the elephant in the room today. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, and the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, amongst others in our own government, have both been fined for lockdown breaches. So, as all of you know, there were a bunch of parties happening in 2020 when everyone else was in lockdown, not seeing their loved ones, potentially suffering, from loneliness and other mental health issues. Because we were serving the greater good, right? We wanted to make sure that we did as much as we possibly could to fight COVID and prevent the spread to vulnerable people and to anyone generally. And while this was happening, obviously the government was partying and stuff. And we all kind of thought that the investigation into this, which was done, did feel like a bit under duress. It certainly didn't seem like the authorities were very willing. They weren't eager. They weren't jumping into this investigation like, yes, let's go for it. They kind of had to have their arm twisted a bit. And we all kind of thought, I know I certainly did, that they were not going to really find anything. There weren't going to be any repercussions for the politicians that were going to be implicated. And that is not the case. Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak have both been fined for lockdown breaches, and more than 50 cases relating to the government have been referred for fixed penalties. So the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are both criminals, and that's pretty amazing. I mean, it is the first time that a sitting Prime Minister in modern British history has committed a crime while in office. That is, if you don't include war crimes, obviously. And Boris Johnson, I think he always wanted to go down in history as a special Prime Minister. And here we are, the first criminal. It's pretty amazing. And Rishi Sunak, obviously, in the exact same boat. But what I find really interesting is something that Rishi Sunak said, actually, not too long ago, when he was asked if he was at the party. So let's take a look at that clip.
So will the Chancellor categorically deny in the House that he or any of his officials or spads attended any of the Downing Street Christmas parties on the 27th of November or the 18th of December last year?
Yeah. Chancellor? No, Mr. Speaker, I did not attend any parties.
He didn't attend any parties, apparently. I mean, so the Chancellor lied to Parliament. Fucking hell, cool, nice. I mean, I don't really know what else to say anymore, guys. I'm losing the ability to even be angry at this point. It's just so, well, that's Rishi. But we can't be like that, right? We can't just let them get away with it. We have to, maintain democratic norms and the basic rule of law and all that good stuff. So I think it's worth pointing out that now both Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak have lied to Parliament on this issue, and presumably on others, let's be honest. But how have the opposition responded to the Prime Minister and the Chancellor and a bunch of other people in the government breaking the law while they were in government? And of course, being charged with fines. How have they responded? Well, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, everyone's least favourite political party, said that Parliament should be recalled for a vote of confidence in the Prime Minister. That's Sir Ed Davey. The Lib Dems, you may remember them from the 2010 election campaign, when they said that they were going to abolish tuition fees if they got into government. That was like their biggest policy. And then they got into government with the Conservatives, and that government then tripled them. So you may remember those guys, but they do have a good point here. There should probably be a vote of no confidence in Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak's leadership, because a politician in a position of immense power broke the law. That's about as bad as it gets, right? I mean, you'd think so. Labour also said that they should both resign. Keir Starmer said that they should resign. We have a beautiful tweet from Sir Keir. He's been calling for their resignation for a little while now because of this issue. And I mean, he's absolutely right. I am no massive Keir Starmer fan. I think that he has a lot of issues, and he's made a lot of mistakes. But he's certainly better than Boris Johnson, and better than Rishi Sunak, for that matter, as well. So, yeah, things are looking pretty shit in British politics. But will they resign? Will they leave office? I think that's very unlikely, actually. It'd be great if they did. But then again, who would replace them? You know, some other people who are incredibly corrupt and incompetent and quite evil. But they should still resign. They should, no matter who's going to replace them, they should, because they are not fit for office, and they're certainly not fit to lecture anyone about the rule of law or about security or anything like that ever again. The Prime Minister is supposed to be the kind of person who makes the laws. They make the laws, and they are in charge of enforcing them. And fundamentally, if the Prime Minister is breaking them, he's breaking laws, and the Prime Minister is a criminal, then just how on earth could you possibly expect there to be genuine authority and genuine trust in the political system? There isn't going to be. And that has been deteriorating ever since the Conservatives entered office. Although, to be fair, New Labour didn't do wonders for it, but this is a whole new level. So, yeah, that's shit. What's going on in France, though, across the English Channel? Come on, they must be a little better over there. Well, the answer is no. It's also bad. Everything is bad, basically. No, there's hope, I'm sure, in places. Haven't found it yet, but it'll be there. So, there's just been the first round of the French presidential election. Now, in case you don't know, the way that the president of France is elected is there is an open round where anyone who gets so many signatures or something can run. So lots of different candidates run for the first round, and then the two most popular candidates in the first round then go on to the second round, where it's just those two, and then obviously whoever wins becomes the president. In 2017, Emmanuel Macron, the current president of France, he ran, and he was first in the first round, and then in the second round he beat Marine Le Pen, who's the daughter of another political figure. I forget his first name now, but yeah, who's also called Le Pen, obviously. And they have both been leaders of this far-right party, she and her father, called the National Front or the National Rally. And she lost in that. Marine Le Pen got, I think, about 33% of the popular vote, and Macron got sort of 66 or something. Now, in this election, it's been a little different. Obviously, Macron has been in power for 5 years, and things in France haven't really got better for anyone except maybe a few rich people. There have been bits and bobs here and there that Macron has done that have maybe helped some people in France, and certainly some of his actions to ensure that industries don't collapse and things like that during the coronavirus pandemic were good. But overall, Macron is characterized as a president of the rich, right? People see him as a sort of smarmy businessman, politician type, right? Because he was a banker, right? He still came out first, and Marine Le Pen still came out second this time round. But if we look at the vote share, I think it's really, really interesting that almost getting into the second round, almost to face off against Emmanuel Macron, is Jean-Luc Mélenchon. Now, Jean-Luc Mélenchon is a left-wing sort of firebrand, right? He is some people call him far left. I wouldn't say that he's far left. I wouldn't say he kind of qualifies as that. He doesn't, want to nationalize the whole economy or, anything like that. And he certainly has, he certainly doesn't want to entirely, rid France of any market forces or anything like that. So I wouldn't say he's far left, but he is definitely left-wing, and he's a populist. And in the last election, he got about 19% of the vote. This time round, he got 22%. He's grown his base. Marine Le Pen and Emmanuel Macron have kind of stayed roughly around the same level, and it's pretty impressive that Mélenchon managed to have this campaign that was so effective that he very almost got into the second round, considering he was polling way lower than Macron and Le Pen just a few months ago. What we can also see from the graph, if we get it up again, is that Eric Zemmour is the fourth candidate. Now, he is a political pundit and far-right writer in France, and he didn't do nearly as well as a lot of people expected. And then fifth is Valérie Pécresse, and if you go all the way down there, you can see Anne Hidalgo on 1.8. Now, the reason those two are important is because Valérie Pécresse and Anne Hidalgo were the candidates of the two previously largest political parties in France, the Republicans and the Socialists. Those guys were the sort of, the typical centre-right, centre-left political parties. Think of it a bit like the Conservatives and Labour in the UK, or the Republicans and the Democrats in America, although obviously both of those parties are right-wing, really, in America. But anyway, they were kind of by far the two biggest parties. They were the traditional left-right parties, and they have collapsed in the last 5 years. In the 2017 election, they both didn't do nearly as well as they would have hoped and they had expected. This time they did even worse. Valérie Pécresse was actually one of the front runners at one point, but she kind of collapsed during the campaign. So who's going to win in the election? What does that mean in the second round? What does that mean for France? And what's this campaign all about? Well, first off, the campaign, something that I think people need to realize about France is there was this kind of mass hysteria that was happening in Europe, sort of 2013 to 2017, particularly. And it affected pretty much every European country. It was a big issue in the 2015 general election in the UK and the 2016 Brexit vote in the UK. And it was all about immigration, particularly from Islamic countries. People worried about Islam and the influence of that. There was a lot of xenophobic rhetoric. There was a lot of Islamophobia. There were people who had genuine concerns about actual terrorism, of course, but there was a lot of bigotry there as well. That kind of abated a little bit in the after 2017. For a lot of European countries, in the UK especially, there's still xenophobia, there's still Islamophobia, there's still a lot of problems like that. But the issues that most people were talking about didn't pertain to that. There wasn't this kind of massive wave of Islamophobia still sticking around in Britain as much. Of course, it's still a problem, don't get me wrong. In France, that never really left. That era of politics from 2013 to 2017, where there was a lot of that, imagine the kind of very toxic atmosphere of the 2014 European elections in Britain, or the 2015 general election, or the 2016 Brexit campaign. Imagine that all the time. That's basically what's been happening in France. And Marine Le Pen and Eric Zemmour and several other candidates really hit home on this very important issue for a lot of French people, that their national identity and their strength as a nation is being undermined and corroded by Islam. Now, is there any truth to that? No. Not really, but it's very effective because Emmanuel Macron and previous presidents have not improved the standard of living for French people. Most French people have seen their wages stagnate or even shrink in real terms over the last decade and a half. Things have not been going well in France. It's harder to buy a home. The social care system needs serious reform. Wages aren't nearly good enough, and France is lagging behind on the in the race to transform the economy into a green one and become a green leader. And France really could do that if its government had the will to do it. But Macron's doesn't, and neither has any of the previous ones in the past sort of 15 years. So they're tapping into that very, very real sense of anger and turning it into something deeply sinister, right? That it is Islam and it is immigrants and so on that are causing this kind of issue. But really, it's much more the level of massive wealth inequality that there is in France, and a government that isn't willing to invest in things that are going to create wealth and help people improve living standards. And obviously, I support turning pretty much every company into a cooperative. So it's owned by the employees, it's owned by the workers rather than a couple of executives. And we'll probably do a video on that actual issue at some point, separate from a live show. But Right now, I think it's just important to state that that would be a much better way of organizing the economy. But France's main politicians don't want to do that. But that's why Jean-Luc Mélenchon was able to go so far with his campaign and very nearly get into the second round, because people are very angry at the establishment and they want change. He's offering a kind of change that would genuinely help a lot of people. He wanted to get full pensions for people aged 60 and over. He wanted to invest more in infrastructure, in industry, in public services. He wanted to raise the minimum wage. He wanted to empower the unions in France to make sure that they could make sure their workers had better working conditions, fairer pay, better hours, and so on. He wanted to improve the housing market, build a lot more houses. He wanted to combat climate change by decarbonizing the economy, investing more in green industry. There were all these kind of different policies that he wanted to implement, and they were genuinely going to help people. Of course, Le Pen is really thin on the ground with those kind of policies. But if you can find someone to blame, often people will channel their anger into voting for you. So that's kind of, I think, a lot of the reason why this has gone the way it has. What's going to happen in this election, though? Who's going to win? That is an incredibly difficult question. I don't know. In the 2017 presidential election in France, Macron walked it, right? He won by a significant margin. He got about 66, 67% of the popular vote. That's massive, right? A US president can only dream of winning by that much. Like Joe Biden, for example, he only won like 51% of the vote in the 2020 election. And Donald Trump was on like 47 or something, 46. But that was a massive win. That being said, it wasn't as much as when Marine Le Pen's father ran against Jacques Chirac in, I think it was the early 2000s, when Chirac absolutely decimated and won over 70% of the vote. But it's still a big margin. And this has kind of, I think, made some people a bit complacent. I think it might have made Macron complacent, because now the polls are showing us it's going to be a hell of a lot closer. It's going to be way closer, way closer than it originally you might thought it was. And this is a really interesting diagram here that we've got up, because it kind of shows where people's votes are going depending on who they voted for in the first round. Now, if you voted for Le Pen or Macron in the first round, obviously you're very, very likely to vote for them again. But it's interesting because we can see that there isn't an exact correlation between sort of left and right. Some people who vote for a left-wing candidate end up choosing a right-wing one. Some people who vote for a right-wing one end up going for Macron, who's kind of a sort of liberal centre-right figure. So it's really interesting and very, very close. I've seen polls that put it, obviously we have the undecideds here, but I have polls where they don't factor in undecided, and they say, look, if you had to choose, it'd be 51-49 in favour of Macron, 52-48 in favour of Macron. There's definitely a chance that this could go Le Pen's way, and I think she might. Macron promised change. He was a sort of centrist populist who was trying to appear very pragmatic, like he had all these new, fresh ideas. He wasn't left-wing, he wasn't right-wing, he wasn't part of the mainstream political parties. He'd made his own party when he ran in 2017, and it just hasn't fixed any of France's problems. The reforms he's implemented have done very little to help people. And as much as I think that he had potentially some decent ideas, and I've read his book, Revolution, there is nowhere near enough in there to fundamentally alter the nature of France in a way that is going to curb the cost of living crisis and improve the lives of most French people. And this is a beautiful country. This is a magnificent country, France. And, it's one of our close neighbours, and it's a real shame. And I think Le Pen is now that populist, right? And if it's a question of the establishment versus a populist, an anti-establishment figure, I think it really could go her way, which is scary, because she is someone who has literally said that she has the same kind of politics as Donald Trump, and more scarily, Vladimir Putin. And I imagine Macron's team will be rolling that clip out many, many times. So her policies, a lot of them are really very concerning, particularly with the treatment of immigrants. So who knows how this is going to go, but either way, the problems that France has are not going to be fixed, which is a shame. So the next story we have is about the really quite harrowing video that I think a lot of people have already seen about the sort of civil unrest that's happening in Shanghai because of lockdowns. So lockdowns are somewhat of a thing of the past now for a lot of countries in the world, especially other countries in Western Europe. But in China, they never really stopped. They're refusing to sort of live with COVID, and rather than employ a sort of track and trace system in this vein of South Korea, it was pretty successful in the like the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. Excuse me, voice break. In 2020, there was very little recognition by the Chinese government that we have to get back to normal life at some point. So Shanghai's got about 26 million people who live there. It's a very, very populated, densely populated city. It's also a financial hub. It's, one of the wealthiest places in China, and people are stuck in their homes. You can't even leave your house because of this Omicron outbreak that's happened recently. You can't leave your house. They put tape on your door so they know if you've opened it. And you can't leave, go for like shopping or anything, unless you actually have someone working for the government who will escort you to the shops or to a place where you can pick up like a government food package. So it's very extreme. And there's this quite disturbing video, I think, of people sort of screaming, lots and lots of people screaming out the top of their apartments, out the window. So if we can get the clip up. I'm not 100% certain that you could all hear that, but it's pretty grim. Yeah, so there's people who are in these high-rise buildings, a lot of them, yelling and screaming and sort of wailing. And I think the consequences of locking people in their homes and not allowing them to leave for any reason other than food, and not giving them the mental health support that they need, is incredibly reckless and foolish and callous. And I think that the local government should probably be ashamed of themselves. There are no easy decisions to make in a crisis, and this pandemic is still technically ongoing, as we know. It's very important that people are wary of that, but this is I think just way too far. It's incredibly dangerous to have so many people locked up like that. Yeah, it's very concerning to watch, and I just hope that China realizes that we can't just keep using lockdowns. The whole point of lockdowns was to delay the spread so we could prevent more dangerous variants, so that we can get vaccines, right? And develop decent track and trace systems, and then after a while, so that we could use the vaccines. And that we can't, we've done that now. There's only so far that you can go with these lockdowns, and I think it's hurting people now, a lot. Yeah, so pretty grim scenes. But of course, we have the hot take of the week this week. Everyone's favorite part of the show. It's certainly my favorite part. And we have our new intro to play. Take it away.
I've thought deeply about this, and I simply haven't got a clue.
Thank you, Nigel. So hot take of the week this week, it was difficult. There's so many stupid fucking things out there on the internet. There's so many ridiculous takes that are just beyond mean or stupid, or some combination of the two. But this one takes the cake, I think, this week. and it may be the worst I've seen yet. So there was a BBC article. Obviously, the cost of living crisis is hitting a lot of people. Poverty has skyrocketed since the Conservatives came to power in 2010, but this has gotten even worse, as you all know, recently. And the BBC article was quoting a nurse who has said, I skip meals to feed my children. And this guy, Kevin Edger, I imagine, gave himself that name, thinking it was edgy, but spelt it wrong on the form, and now he can't be asked to change it. I don't know. But he basically said this. He said, yet you can buy a big bag of dry pasta that would feed a family for about 50 pence. If you shop and cook properly, you can eat healthy meals really cheaply. I would love to see how she spends her salary. And below that was a response that I personally loved from Sandy, a woman who said, in her name is Sandy Conservative Back Boris. And I don't know if we have the tweet to show, but basically she said, what is the father paying if he's still alive? Why have they got a cat? And you know what? That's a good point, Sandy. That's an excellent point, because thinking about it, it takes money to look after a cat, money you could spend on food and stuff. So I think what they should do is either sell the cat or kill it and then cook it and eat it. That's at least like 3 meals there. Then you can use its skull as a cup, so you can save money on cups, and then take the rest of its bones and sell them as Chinese medicine in Chinese markets. So, and that's going to make a bunch of money. So ridiculous. And also they're wearing clothes. Last time I checked, humanity survived for a long time without wearing clothes. So if they sell their clothes, then they'll have more money. And also, they have paint on their walls. People will buy paint. You scrape the paint off. You can sell your hair on the black market also. And last time I checked, mobile phones, hello, expensive. So really, it's their own fault, isn't it? That is the attitude. That is the attitude that people have got in this country. That there is nothing, unless you are homeless with no earthly possessions, you are just naked on the street. Nothing at all. Conservatives will never admit that even a tiny part of the reason that you are suffering in poverty or destitution or homelessness is because of something other than your own doing. That maybe it's not entirely your fault. Sometimes it is people's fault. Sometimes people do stupid things. That is maybe the case for some people. But the vast majority of the time, there are fundamental, enormous barriers to people for getting out of poverty. And this fucker, Kevin Edger, and his wonderful followers are somehow implying that a nurse who can't feed her kids, it's her own fault because she doesn't use her salary properly. Now look, what? I'm actually getting angry. I'm actually getting really angry. But look, I don't understand. What do you want these people to do? Right? Do you want them to live absolutely miserable lives just so they can scrape by? Right? Because, like, what is the point in being alive if you can't have any nice things? If you can't do anything good? All you can do is just about feed your family and heat your home. That's all you can do. You do that and work, and that's it. Right? You got no TV, you got no pets, you got no nice clothes, you got no phone, you got no fucking, music, you got no books, you've got nothing, right? And look, people shouldn't just be able, it's a patriotic thing. You shouldn't just want people to be able to scrape by. You should want people to not just survive, but thrive. You should want everyone to be able to live a middle-class existence. That should be the whole fucking point of human development. What is the point of a country being so wealthy, having so much money, like our country does, if we aren't going to make sure that everyone can live a decent quality of life? Everyone can just live in dignity and security and economic freedom, and of course political freedom. So what is the point? it's not people's fault. It's not. And also, even when it is, being in poverty makes it much more difficult to make good decisions, right? Because there's been a lot of studies into this, been a lot of research, and it's called scarcity mentality, the effect of poverty on your cognitive abilities. Because you're stretched so thin, you're constantly worrying about if you can afford to fucking feed your kids, or if they're gonna, there's a hole in one of their school jumpers, are they going to be able to go to school in that? You're constantly worrying about if you're going to be able to afford electricity. Constantly worrying that you're going to be able to afford to even cook the meals for the food that you might not be able to buy, and you're terrified of being let go of your job, and you can't pay the fucking rent, you're never going to be able to own your own home, and everything is piling up on top of you. And all the while, you can't give your kids a decent standard, like a fun experience. You can't take them out places. You can't take them out for dinner. You certainly can't buy them expensive toys or like consoles or anything. And if you can, it'll be at the expense of something that you really wanted. What kind of life is that? And the evidence shows us that the effects of poverty on cognitive ability are roughly equal to losing a night's sleep or the effects of alcoholism. It's a serious thing. So why not just fucking help people? Why not just make it so that wages are decent and the cost of living gets taken care of by the government? Fundamental things that people need to live should not cost money. They shouldn't. So this one, it wasn't just stupid, it made me angry. But there's a great thing from Jack Monroe, who does great work on informing people about fuel poverty, and this is part of the this is part of the thread that she did on Twitter, and she's really, really good for stuff like this. I'd really recommend all you giving her a follow if you have Twitter, because she's a very, very articulate campaigner. She really kind of conveys what these issues are and why they can't just be solved by individuals and things like that. But of course, she does offer help to people on an individual level as well, because the government doesn't fucking listen to her. So I recommend reading that whole thread and stuff. So thank you all very much for watching. As always, it's been a bit of a roller coaster this week, but you know what it always is. This has been the Riley Hall Show. As always, make sure to like and subscribe, share the show around. It really helps. And comment if there's anything that you want to see us talk about in terms of hot take of the week or anything really, in the comments below. That would be fantastic. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Cheers.